Right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today this is great, I'm joined by two people who are in different parts of the world right now. First of all, Dr. Joseph Riggio, who is in Sarasota, Florida. How are you doing, Joseph?
Mm. Yeah, beautiful down here right now.
Excellent. And then all the way from Denmark, late at night, Denmark in Europe, we have Henrik Wenøe. How are you doing?
Mm.
How
Thank
you
you.
doing?
And here it's not so nice. It's really freezing and snow, but yeah.
Yeah, well, we like to mix it up a little bit here. And Heinrich, you're the CEO and owner of Acuity World, over 30 years leadership experience in sales, marketing, communication leadership. You are a Mythos Self master trainer, and you incorporate cutting edge technology methodologies like Soma semantic modeling and the Mythos Self process, empowering professionals worldwide with the satisfaction selling method. And Dr. Joseph is the architect of
Mm.
the Mytho. Is it Mytho or Mytho? Do you call it Mytho?
Mytho.
Mytho. I was going. Mytho self process and Soma semantics, a neurocognitive scientist and the designer of Act One adaptive cognitive training and generative flow performance enhanced training, a published author, international speaker. You have your own podcast, and over 35 years training salespeople, multinational Fortune 1000s. And what we're going to talk about today is satisfaction selling. So, either of you to start with, just give me at a high level the genesis of where satisfaction selling comes from.
I can say it comes from Joseph originally, and maybe he could speak a little more to where he actually got the inspiration from. Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, what happened was, John, years ago, let me go back one step before that. I was a practicing architect. And primarily what my job became as a partner in the firm was rainmaking, finding
Mhm.
clients, selling projects, and helping to develop our younger staff as we were bringing them in. And I found I was really good at the people thing. And when computers came into the world of architecture, I lost a bit of interest. I didn't want to draw with a keyboard. I wanted to draw with paper and pencil, but it wasn't going to cut it where the industry was going. So I began looking for something else to do. And I began studying with a number of different people, wound up with a gentleman named Roy Frazier. And Roy had built a model called the generative imprint. And the fundamental idea of the model was we have an internal template that's organized positively. That is, when you follow it, you can call it intuition to make it simple.
Mhm.
It guides you to creating outcomes that are really super aligned with who you are, an authentic position of operation in the world.
Mm.
And when I began working, I wasn't following exactly what he was doing. I went into the world of business and I went into doing what I knew how to do, was training people how to sell. And I built a consulting business. But I took that idea of this positive organization and ran with it. And I found I was getting great results.
Mm.
And I began asking this question: what do people who are off the charts successful in sales look like? And so have a bit of a science background. I began to play with the analytic environment and statistical analysis. And what I did is I went and I built a bell curve, and I went to the extreme right end of the bell curve, that the what they call Six Sigma level.
Right.
And I found people who were selling at that level. Then within that level, because it was possible, I began to ask the question: what do the Six Sigma people within that level look like? And what it looked like was, in some cases, these people were selling as much as 80% of the entire company's sales
Yeah.
for a year. It was
Mhm.
off the charts, crazy. And I wanted to know what they were doing differently. And that's where the model evolved from. And the simple answer, I don't want to get into a long philosophical discussion, was they assumed that people wanted an outcome, not to fix problems.
Mm.
And what they did is they started selling solutions, not trying to uncover problems that they could fix and resolve. And this was then, we're talking 1990 or so, radical.
Yeah.
And the reality is, in 2025, you read the sales books and study the sales models and watch the videos online, it's still relatively radical. Everybody tells
Mhm.
you have to be a master problem solver to sell. Find the wound, exacerbate it, make people suffer in pain, and then give them the solution that's going to make it all go away. It's just ridiculous because human beings don't want that.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
where the model came from, was giving people what they actually want, which is the solution without the pain.
Yeah. And what's always interesting, Joseph and Henrik, is that when it comes to the top performing salespeople, if you just ask them normally what they do, they can't really tell you. I mean, a lot of them are just they do it naturally, they're unconsciously competent, and it takes somebody from the outside to actually study it and actually uncover and extract from them what they actually do.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
and if you listen to them, they don't mean to. I'm not suggesting malfeasance or
Sure.
maliciousness at all. They tell you the wrong things.
Yeah. I
Right.
actually had that experience with my father 24 years ago. I had attended my first training with Joseph, got really inspired, had seen this satisfaction selling method in action. And at a family party, I told him, "Wow, this is now I have really uncovered something magical here." And then he said, "No, Henrik, it's not how sales is done." And then he went to the cellar, found some old manuals. Said, "You have to do this." And then we left the discussion. Later that evening, I asked him, but Father, you have been a salesperson all your life. What have been the best sales call you have had recently?" And then he started to talk about this perfect sales call. And he just talked about something very different that he did earlier that evening. Because
Mm.
when he was not thinking about doing sales, he was actually doing what we are talking about here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And what I like about what you're talking about is we have this strange concept that, the buying and selling, that process, that it is inherently it's an ugly process, or that it's a tense process. And at the end of the day, why shouldn't it be an enjoyable process for both parties if it's executed with the right kind of with the win-win mentality and the problem solving, or mentality?
Right.
Why shouldn't it be enjoyable? And I guess I presume part of the satisfaction selling is it's satisfying for both parties.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. The one of the things I would say, I'm not going to speak about other people or models or any of that
Sure.
kind of thing, but if you know them, you'll recognize where I'm coming from. There are models out there which are suggesting you have to spend the majority of your time, 80+% of your time, uncovering problems. There's nobody I know who likes talking about the problems or the things that make them uncomfortable. They may like getting their angst out, and relieving themselves, putting the burden on you so they don't have to carry it alone, but it doesn't feel good.
Mm.
And even in one of the most well-researched model out there, the author of that model, the researcher says, the only thing that's going to give the client satisfaction is when you offer them the solution. And when I read that, I went, well, why wouldn't you just design a model which is all about providing satisfaction from the starting point? So we start with the most ridiculous question in the world, as far as most salespeople are concerned, which is what's already working? And it turns the whole model upside down, because
Mhm.
most salespeople are going, what's not working? What's the problem? What keeps you up at night?
Yeah.
I'm actually going, if the day went perfectly, what would it look like? So when you laid in bed, you closed your eyes and you went to sleep immediately. I'd rather know that.
Yeah, and that's obviously, Henrik, it's psychologically a completely different approach, because when you ask me, oh, what's not working, what's keeping you up at night? I mean, immediately, I'm barrier comes up, and I'm like, I don't really want to have this conversation.
Yep.
Um, and it's also weird, isn't it? Because it's also I always found it kind of strange that you would start off by almost kind of say you're almost intimating in many ways, saying you're obviously doing some stuff really badly right now.
Yeah. And I think here the crazy stuff is that if you start to know something about human and the psychological effect of this is that if you ask people to share what's not working while they're looking at you, over time they will start to associate you with things that doesn't work.
Mm, that's interesting.
Because basically the emotion you provoke in the other person when you interact with them, they will end up associating with you. So if you make me feel bad, you are bad. So
Mm,
and I think the reason why the traditional model are still around is that it's not that they don't work. They work once, maybe twice, maybe three times. But if you want to build long-term, positive, sustainable relationship with your customers, I think our point here is that then you need to not work with pains. Then you need to work with what's actually working, because even if what's working is the solution of the competitor on an unconscious level, they will start to associate you with what's already working for them. And they would just relax, they would open up. And I think this is what allow them to access not what they need. We don't want to give customers what they need. We want to give them what they truly want. And if you start from the problem, they cannot tell you what they truly want. They can only tell you what they want to get rid of. And that's not what people truly want.
Yeah.
It's
So,
really
so just explain to me the difference between, just for the audience, the difference between what somebody needs and what somebody wants.
I think, again, what people want is the end result. It's what your product, your solution can give them. So when people say, wow, I want money. No, you don't want money. You want what money can bring you. If people come to me and say, wow, I want your sales training, I would say, you're a liar. You don't want my sales training. You want the effect of my sales training. So you need my sales training, but you want the sales.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't even want the sales, you want what the sales can give you. So there's always this deeper want. So I think the deeper want you can uncover, the more pull you create in the mind of the customer you're working with.
Yeah. So Joseph, take me through your model a little deeper.
Okay. I mean, the model is we try to keep things simple because simple usually works.
Right.
And if nothing else, it's easier to remember, right? So we start with this idea of asking this question, as Henrik was just putting it, what do you want? We really start with that question. And we begin from this idea of what's working. So we're establishing these two things in simultaneity. So we say, what's already working? Because once you start thinking about what's working, hey, what do you like about your podcast, John? What do you really enjoy doing about it? What are the shows that worked out the best for you? Where'd you get the most positive feedback? The state of mind you're in at that point is open and receptive. So we're going to establish a state of mind before we establish even our inquiry into what's not present. Even the want. We don't even want to know the want until you're in a positive state of mind to establish that. Then once we have that, we've asked you what's working. We'll say, so if that's working, what would make this thing even better? So we go from what we call a positive state present to a desired state in the future. So in the future, if this thing's already working, you already get this podcast, it's working great, John, you love what you're doing, you had these great shows, what could possibly make the podcast even better that we might be able to show up and deliver or not? We don't even know yet.
Right.
Because at this level, we shouldn't be trying to sell you. We should be trying to find out if we have anything to sell you. And this is one of the adjustments I think salespeople need to make too, is they need to own the no as well as the yes. So I want to be able to say to you early on, hey, John, I'm not really sure that this is the moment in time where I can be of benefit to you.
Yeah.
You may need something else. And if I have a referral, by the way, I'm going to give it to you because that's going to endear you to me even a little bit more. So 5 years, 2 years, a month, a week down the road, we may do business together.
Yeah. And let's face it, that's one of the toughest things that for salespeople and sales leaders, indeed, it's cleaning out your pipeline, right? Isn't it? It's admitting to yourself that I'm having a great conversation with Joseph and Henrik here and it's going on, but being honest about it's not really going anywhere. I don't really think I can help them. And I'm going to have to let this go at some stage, or I'm going to have to give you a referral. And that's such a psychologically tough thing for salespeople and sales leaders to do.
It is until you transcend it. So again, what Henrik and I do when we're working with clients, we're working with them at multiple levels. It's not just strategy. We're actually working at a level of identity, who they think of themselves as being. And salespeople, frankly, many, now I won't say all, but many think of themselves in adversarial roles.
Yep.
You have money. I want to get your money in my pocket or in my company's pocket because that's what I do for a living, as opposed to how can I help you expand what you're already invested in a way where it generates greater results for you and me. And then it's not a function of getting your money. Your money naturally becomes an investment, not a cost, not an expense. And I don't care whether that's a product or a service or a combination. When you approach sales that way, you understand there's always a bigger pie than you need to eat.
Yeah.
And so you can afford to share the pie or give it away or go to a new one. And the speed of success becomes more important than getting every single sale. I'd rather say no to you now so I can say yes to Henrik or get a yes from Henrik so that I can move quickly through my pipeline and find where the viable opportunities are.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things going on there. I mean, number one is you have to have an abundant mindset in order to be able to think like that. And the other thing I think unfortunately, salespeople have been portrayed very negatively in popular culture and all of that. And a lot of people have internalized that because let's face it, and you probably come across this a lot when you're training, is there's an awful lot of people who never meant to be salespeople, right? They did marketing degrees in college and then came out and discovered that there was like 5,000 sales jobs to every one marketing job. So they thought, I'll take this job for a bit, or I can, and then they feel stuck. So it's like never something they've truly embraced. Do you come across that when you're training some folks?
I think when we meet them first, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they're halfway through the training, realize that, wow, it's actually possible to be yourself and be successful working with customers, then they really start to enjoy the position they're in. Because again, you can say, if we are being a little playful here, we are not training people to sell anything. Actually, we want them to anti-sell. We want them to develop into what I sometimes call become biologists, knowing the art of helping people to buy. So they're much more, in a way, facilitating, helping the customer get what they want and need so that they can excel, because then you create value. And when you create value, you can ethically claim some of that value for yourself. And I think a lot of the salespeople we train are technical people who they have a technical degree in engineering or in science because they're selling technical products.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been often forced into this, I would say, traditional sales model, which is about basically going out there and get it and nail it, instead of relaxing, understanding, and then yes, no. And when they understand that they can actually operate as a decent human being, help the customer, and then get the business in that way, it's like, wow, you just see a whole organization totally re-energize. I had a woman in a training in US a few years back, and she said, Henrik, often when we go to these sales trainings, when we leave, there's a lot of things we have to do when we get home. But that's not what I experience here. Here's actually things I would like to go home and do.
Right.
So I think when we do training, we actually apply the same model we want them to do with the customers. We apply to our students.
Mm.
So
And Joseph, I mean, I think sometimes, unfortunately, salespeople, we forget, that the human beings on the other side, right? The customer or the prospect, they're human beings, and especially I think in B2B selling is like, we think, well, you're operating on behalf of a corporation or whatever, therefore you should be interested in what I'm selling you, not realizing that when you're purchasing, whether you're part of a committee or not, is purchasing in a B2B context, I always say, can be career enhancing or can be career limiting, depending on the outcome of what you purchase. So there's a lot of personal emotion tied up in it too.
For sure.
It's really personal, really personal. Yeah.
One of the things we strongly discourage, I would say, I'm not going to speak for Henrik entirely on this one, but I discourage it to the point where I don't allow it to happen, is what I call the song and dance or the dog and pony show.
Mhm.
And customers draw you in. They suck you into this. They go, okay, so what do you got for me? Show me.
Yeah.
And they expect a PowerPoint presentation. They expect you to, here's what we have. Here's our features and benefits, and here's the price conditions and our terms. And they want you to dance in front of them. And before we can do that, what I'm going to say is just what you're saying. This is a person in front of you. What kind of dance do they like? What kind of music do they attend to? So find out about them first. Create a relationship before you allow yourself to be drawn into the presentation. Because first of all, again, John, I'm not a podcast producer. If what you're looking for is a podcast producer, I'm the wrong guy to be in the room with you. I should know that before I give you my song and dance about what we do.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean. So I think when you approach it from the point of view of I know what you're expecting and want, which is me to lay out everything I can do and what we have and how we do it and who we've done it for and testimonials and all that. But before we go there, just let me know what you need. What does the purchase mean to you as a B2B customer? But for you personally, What's your engagement in this? What's it mean to you? How did you wind up being the person I'm sitting in front of instead
Mm.
of some guy down the hall who could have also been making the purchase but isn't?
Mhm.
And when I build that relationship, I transcend again that issue of that adversarial positioning, which can crop up as soon as you enter into letting them set the terms. And some companies, by the way, built their whole purchasing process around this. I've worked with
Sure.
some customers of Walmart's,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Walmart has this very adversarial purchasing process. And
oh,
even with Walmart, the guys I've trained come back and go, I was able to control that interaction, and they didn't draw me in the way they sucked me in the last 87 times I was there.
Mm.
yeah. The old here's the size it needs to be, here's the price it needs to be, it needs to fit here, and it needs to look like that.
And when can you deliver?
Yeah.
On those terms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. And just tell me, how much of this boils down to also kind of self-awareness and learning about yourself and building confidence? Because there's a lot of fake confidence. You have the person who can sort of try and come across like, oh, I'm a super confident guy, confident in the products or services that I'm selling. But true confidence from being able to be, calm and friendly and positive, that takes a different level of confidence and self-awareness.
I'm going to
You
jump in and let Henrik
yeah,
answer it, but I just
okay.
want to change the word. I
Mm.
would call it authenticity.
Mhm.
Confidence is cheap. Authenticity is more dear.
Mhm.
Mm. Yeah, I think what I was about to say, I think what we train people is to go beyond confidence. So to a state where they don't need confidence because they're just themselves.
Mhm.
Where they're just being relaxed, and because again what something magical happen, and then when you show up as yourself being open and relaxed, you basically i- infect the customer with that attitude, and now they relax and say, wow, this is a human in front of me, it's not a facade, it's not and suddenly it's changed the whole dynamic. I was training a company a few years back in an industry where they said, Henrik, we get all of this about understanding, building relationship, but our customers, they work with defense project. They cannot really tell us anything because everything is confidential.
Right.
So they send us this request for a proposal, and then we just have to give a quote. And that's okay. I don't know your industry. Maybe you're right. 1 year later, I met them at a follow-up workshop, and then they said, Henrik, it's strange because over the last year, the industry have changed.
Mm,
Now people are much more open. We can have dialogues that tell us things they have never told before. It's really strange. And I was just thinking, maybe you have changed.
yeah.
Maybe you have actually been able to create an environment where people are willing to share information because they understand that if they give you the central information pieces, then you can actually serve me better. If you don't know what I really want, how on earth can you give me what I want unless you are clairvoyant? And a lot of salespeople act as clairvoyant. They try to read the mind of the customer instead of asking questions from a position where people are actually willing and able to answer.
Yeah, I've always found that trying to read people's minds has never turned out very well. Particularly if I try to read my wife's mind, that never works out that well for me. But anyway,
I think that's universal, John.
yeah, I think so. And just before we end, what's one last piece of advice you would give to sales leaders and salespeople who may be watching this?
Go first, Henrik. I'll save a very short
Yeah,
one for the end.
I think if it's about sales leaders, I would say that treat your salespeople the way you want them to treat your customers.
That's good. That's very
Then you will kick ass, as we say in Denmark. Yeah.
it's a famous old Danish saying, I know.
It's from the old Vikings.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice I'd give, if I had to give only one piece of advice, is if you can't sell yourself on what you're selling, you're never going to sell anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a profound piece. I mean, I both pieces to be honest, but it's simple but profound. I mean, I don't know how many times I've engaged with somebody who's been trying to sell me something, and I just sense that they don't believe in what they're selling. They're not. And you're thinking, if you don't believe in it, like, my goodness, yeah, are you really expecting me to?
Right.
So listen, this has been fantastic. And before we go, just briefly, just tell everybody a little bit more about you and your company.
Yeah, I think we are a company who do a little of different things, but I think in this context we are supplying international companies with sales training, both for leaders and sales professionals. That's really the core thing we're doing in this context. So
Excellent.
bringing in the strategies and the tools to be successful.
Yeah.
And we do it in multiple formats. Like most companies at this point, we have an online, remote access. We have still most of our work, I would say 80+% of our work is in the room with salespeople, because we want them to feel the experience, not just hear it. But the online is really great supportive, and it's also a great way to introduce yourself before you show up in the room.
Absolutely. And everybody, all of the information from Joseph and Henrik will be below this video. So I would encourage you to go check it out. And maybe this will be your year to get some satisfaction from your selling.
Hey, John, thanks so much. I really appreciate you being here and taking us through this.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for watching and listening.
Thank you.